Good morning and welcome to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. Now for today's show, here's attorney Ethel Mitchell.
Welcome. I am attorney Ethel Mitchell of Wills and Trust, LLC. I prepare last wills and testaments, trust, power of attorneys, and I do probate work. If you need your will prepared or considering using a trust, call me at 202-772-1988. Email me at emitchell@willsandtrust.net. That's EMITCHELL at WILLSANDTRUSTS.net, and let me prepare your estate documents. Welcome to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. Welcome to all who are listening live throughout the world on the internet at lawtalkwithethelmitchell.com, WOLDCnews.com, and on the TuneIn app. Today we continue our focus on the law as it impacts churches and nonprofits. Churches and nonprofit organizations are such important institutions in our community. The stronger they are, the stronger it makes our community. I've been a lawyer for over 20 years and can tell you the law is a powerful force in each of our lives. It impacts everything we do and is the one area of life where what you don't know can really, really hurt you, and what you do know can empower you.
That you've got a stupid somebody.
Each week, my aim is to empower you. I'm going to bring you professionals who work with the law every day. We choose an area and explore its direct impact on your life. Our theme for April is law at churches.
Ethel, I'm on your phone.
Yes, I'm going to call you in just a moment, James. Okay? Thank you. Just a minute. Last week, attorney Erika Cole taught us important things that churches need to know and do to be in compliance with the law. At the beginning of the month, Reverend Dr. Michael Chambers shared many issues that confront churches with contracts, construction, child care policies, etc. Next week, April 26, attorney Antonio Arocho will talk about his experience as an attorney who specializes in forming nonprofits and charities and as former executive director of the National Hispanic Bar Association. Remember, if you've missed a program, they are archived on my website at lawtalkwithethelmitchell.com, where you can go and listen and learn. Today we are joined by attorney James Montgomery, a tax expert, who will discuss requirements of an application for 501c3 designation, when you need one and when you don't. We want you to be part of the program and to be able to call in your questions. My executive producer, Stacy Royster, is standing by for your comments or your questions. Call us at 1-800-450-7876. That's 1-800-450-7876, or tweet us at LawTalkEM. Like us at Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell on Facebook. You'll hear from attorney James Montgomery shortly, but first I must remind you that what you hear on this show is for information purposes only. No attorney-client relationship is established by anything that's said on this show. Each person and each organization's circumstances are different. You must seek individual counsel for any situation for which you need legal advice. Our guest, attorney James T. Montgomery, partner with the law firm of Foley Hoag LLP in Washington, D.C., has more than 30 years of experience specializing in tax and business law. His areas of concentration as a tax attorney include nonprofit and tax-exempt organizations, trust and estate planning, retirement and qualified retirement plans, compensation and employee benefits, and structuring business, investments, and real estate transactions. He has served on the IRS Commissioner Advisory Group and on the D.C. Mayor's Select Task Force on Business and Corporate Taxation. Attorney Montgomery has been a frequent lecturer before the American Bar Association, the National Bar Association, and the Washington Bar Association. Attorney Montgomery is a graduate of Morehouse College and Georgetown University Law Center, with a Master's of Law in Taxation. Attorney James Montgomery, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, Ethel.
I'm really pleased that you're here and that you're going to tell us about a very mysterious area of the law that churches and nonprofits need to know about. Tell us exactly, what is a 501c3? What is that designation?
Surely, Ethel. And first of all, a happy Easter weekend to you and your listeners.
Yes, happy Easter to everyone.
Ethel, there's a lot of misinformation about 501c3 organizations, but generally that is a category that the IRS and the federal government allows for certain categories of organizations, which are charitable, educational, scientific, literary, and especially for our focus here today, religious organizations as well.
Okay.
If an organization that falls in any one of those categories is able to obtain this 501c3 status, it basically gets two principal benefits. Number one, any revenues, whether from donations or otherwise, that it receives are completely free from any income taxation.
Oh, that's
and
big.
secondly, any donors, any people who make gifts or donations to such organizations are entitled to take a tax deduction for those donations.
Okay.
And of course, Ethel, that has the added benefit of providing an additional incentive for people to give, to make donations when they know that the organization to which they're giving is a 501c3 organization. In turn, they'll be able to take a tax deduction on their own tax returns when they prepare that.
That's very big. That's very big. But now tell me, are churches required to have that 501c3 designation?
That is where some of the misinformation about 501c3 status actually does arise, Ethel, very often. It is the case that churches do fall in the category of the religious organizations that are entitled to 501c3 organizations and 501c3 status. However, it's not just churches that can qualify for 501c3 status. Other organizations that are religious can also qualify for 501c3 status aside from churches. Perhaps a good example would be an organization that decides to establish a publication, a newsletter, or something of that type, that clearly is designed to promote religion, but is in no way, shape, or form a church. It is also entitled to 501c3 status. So 501c3 status does apply to churches. However, it applies to a broader category of religious organizations as well, not just churches.
Okay, and would schools and daycare centers be part of that category, or are they automatically included if they come from the church or they're part of the church?
It's a very good question, because that area of affiliated organizations affiliated with the church, raises that very question as to whether or not the affiliated organization must itself establish its own separate and distinct 501c3 status, or is it able to more or less piggyback onto the 501c3 status of the church itself. An awful lot of affiliated organizations that are perhaps fundraising organizations, schools, as you posed, and the like, daycare centers, are absolutely required to obtain their own separate and distinct 501c3 status from the IRS, separate and apart from the church. The distinction usually being the extent to which those organizations are developing their own separate source of financial support than the church. If the church is funding virtually all of the operations out of the church's own assets, then those organizations are more or less entitled to piggyback onto the 501c3 status of the church. However, if you have a school, even though it was started by the church, that, for example, is going to be charging tuition as a major part of its operating budget, it's probably got to stand on its own. Probably has to actually obtain its own separate and distinct 501c3 status. If it's going to be a separate daycare center that is going to be charging fees and so forth for its services, it again probably is going to have to establish its own separate and distinct 501c3 status from the church.
That is important for people to know, because I bet a lot of churches don't know that. Remember, my listeners, if you want to ask questions, please call in at 1-800-450-7876. Attorney Montgomery is an expert in this area, and I think it would be great to be able to posit some questions for him. How do you go about getting this designation? What's the process?
Well, Ethel, the arena of obtaining 501c3 status for all organizations that are entitled to it, and that again includes not just religious organizations and churches, but also charitable, educational, scientific, literary organizations. The general process is one which requires that the organization must apply to the IRS to obtain its approval as a 501c3 organization. That's the fundamental requirement. That's done by filing a Form 1023 with the IRS, which requires an awful lot of information about the organization, what it does, how it operates, who its members are, who its board of directors may be, who its officers are, something about their background and the like. An awful lot of detailed information about the organization in order to obtain the approval of the IRS that the organization does qualify and will be recognized as a 501c3 tax-exempt organization.
I see. So you have to have already incorporated before you file the 1023 exemption?
For most organizations, that's exactly the case. The usual requirement is that the organization have incorporated, have set itself up, have established its board of directors, its officers, and the like, and have more or less decided on its actual program and its manner of operation, and then presents all of that to the IRS as part of that Form 1023 application.
I see. Do you advise people to have some legal representation to do that? Because that sounds pretty complicated.
Often with a lot of organizations, it is typical that organizations do obtain some type of legal consultation at the early stage in terms of setting up and establishing the organization, its structure, its operation up front, so that it might have the smoothest path of obtaining the ultimate approval from the IRS as to this 501c3 status.
Okay. And do you have to file like financial reports, bank accounts, and so on like that?
Well, Ethel, it's a good question, because it is the case that when obtaining and seeking 501c3 status from the IRS, that most organizations do have to present information regarding their bank accounts, their bank status, what kind of assets they actually do have, at least to start out, so that the IRS can again examine and determine exactly what kind of operations the organization is going to undertake and whether or not it ultimately is going to qualify as a 501c3 organization. However, as we're having a focus on this Easter weekend with respect to churches, there is an exception when it comes to churches.
Okay.
Churches are treated with
about that. Yeah.
Churches are treated with a bit more of kid gloves in this arena, unlike most other 501c3 organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike the other organizations, churches do not actually have to file this same Form 1023 application in order to obtain the IRS approval. Rather, if you have a valid, bona fide church that will clearly be recognized as such, the church is spared the requirement of having to file this same Form 1023 applications that all other 501c3 organizations must file.
I see. And what about the 990? I know there's a form that nonprofits file that reveal to the public how much money they have and what they use it with. Do churches have to file the 990?
In a very similar manner, churches are actually spared that basic requirement as well.
Okay.
You're exactly right that most 501c3 organizations, charitable, literary, scientific, educational organizations, are all required to file an annual return. We kind of refer to it as a tax return, but it's really not a tax return since the organizations don't have to pay tax. But they do have to provide an awful lot of information about their revenues,
mm-hmm.
and where they came from, what the revenues have been used for, demonstrating that whatever revenues that have been received are actually being used in the process of pursuing the organization's exempt mission. However, churches are spared that requirement, just as they are spared the requirement of having to file the initial application to obtain IRS approval in the first place. They don't have to file these annual returns that all the other 501c3 organizations have to file as well.
I see. So for our listeners, if you do know a educational organization or a non-profit organization, a civil rights organization, or a scientific organization, are you saying that this 990 is a public record and you can actually go to the IRS and find out, how much money this organization made how much they paid in salaries and what they used the money for? Is it really public information like that?
That is exactly the case, Ethel, and many people are often not aware of that.
That's why I'm re-emphasizing it, quite honestly.
When it comes to 501c3 organizations, the general concept that the government and the IRS pursues is that they are operating in the interest of the public trust, and that information regarding the operations of 501c3 organizations should be very transparent. And as a result, there is a legal requirement that virtually all 501c3 organizations must make their Form 1023 application, as well as their annual returns, available for inspection by the public on an ongoing basis.
So people who are running these organizations need to know that is a requirement, because I suspect a lot of people who run organizations may not know that is a requirement.
That is one of the biggest misconceptions that we've actually come across over the years. The notion that an organization that does obtain 501c3 status is in effect becoming part of a somewhat regulated industry, industry regulated by the IRS, that does have these ongoing requirements that the organization make available to the public for inspection, information regarding its annual returns and the like, so that the organization can be somewhat transparent as to how its revenues are being used. Obviously, the goal being that the organization is using the lion's share of its revenues in pursuing its charitable, education, literary, or religious purpose.
That's excellent. We are talking to Attorney James Montgomery on Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. I'm your host, Ethel Mitchell. Do you have any questions about tax-exempt or 501c3 status or legal issues confronting churches? Please contact us here at 1-800-450-7876. Know that you can also contact Attorney James Montgomery. His telephone number is 202-223-1200, 202-223-1200, or by email at jmontgomery@foleyhogue. And let me spell that. That's JMONTGOMERY at FOLEYHOAG.com. Thank you so much for sharing this information. Tell me also, are there any other special things that churches need to know and be aware of in terms of how do they account for donations that are given to them by people?
It's a good question, Ethel, because one of the areas where you'll find a lot of 501c3 organizations, including churches, can sometimes find themselves in a bit of hot water with the IRS. It deals with the area of how they are responding to and dealing with the donations they receive. One of the things that has actually been imposed on 501c3 organizations, including churches, in the last several years, is that they must provide certain information back to the donors. For example, when a donation is made to a church of more than $250 in the course of a year, the church, as well as all other 501c3 organizations, is actually called upon to actually provide a written statement, a so-called written acknowledgement, back to the donor, which basically, in effect, says, this is your receipt. This is a receipt for the amount of the donation that you've made to the church or the other 501c3 organization during the course of the year. That is one of the, you're seeing an awful lot more these days, statements of that type that a number of churches have become very familiar with adhering to, and providing a statement that says, this is how much you've actually given to the church over the course of the year. It is only a requirement once the total donation for the year has actually come to as much as $250 generally.
Okay. Let's also talk about, are there other special tax treatments for the church, let's say for their ministers? Are there, a lot of ministers receive housing allowances. A lot of ministers live in properties that are owned by the churches. Is that considered income to them? Do ministers pay taxes on the value of those benefits?
Well, Ethel, you're pointing to one of the areas that has probably received as much, has become as much a controversial area as virtually any involving 501c3 organizations generally, and that is the treatment of the so-called minister's parsonage. There has been for decades a special tax provision in the tax code that provides that unlike the chief executive of virtually any other organization or even any other 501c3 organization, when it comes to ministers, churches are allowed to provide a parsonage for the minister of the church without there having to be any type of income taxable to the minister for whatever the value of that lodging might be. If you or I, Ethel, were to receive from any organization housing, guess what? We'd actually have to have that reflected on our W-2 as additional income to us from the organization. The one specific category that is excluded from that is that available to ministers. Churches are able to provide a parsonage for their minister without there having to be any type of income tax consequence to the minister for the value of the lodging that he or she is actually receiving. It's true with respect to the parsonage itself. It's also true with churches and ministers when the church provides an allowance, a monetary housing allowance to the minister, to the extent that the minister does in fact use it for purposes of lodging. To that same extent, that minister nevertheless does not have to include any portion of that housing allowance as a taxable amount on their tax return.
Do they? But now tell me, if the minister is paid a salary by the church, is that considered income to the minister for which they do have to report and pay taxes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The minister, as well as any other paid staff of a church, are considered nevertheless employees of the church, generally speaking, and whatever income is paid to them for their services in their capacity as a minister or assistant minister or any other paid staff of the church, yes, they receive the same W-2 as everyone else. They do have to report that as income on their own individual tax returns. But as we were just discussing, the one special carve-out exclusion does apply with respect to any parsonage that is provided to a minister.
Even like a multi-million-dollar parsonage? Does it make any difference?
Theoretically, it doesn't much matter exactly what the value might be. If whatever parsonage or value of parsonage the church can actually afford to provide to its ministers, that can be provided to the minister without any type of taxable income having to be reflected on the minister's own tax return.
That's huge. That is really huge. Well, tell me something else. I don't know if we have time to go through it. I'm told we only have 5 more minutes, but can you speak at all to the question of all this money that's being made on television by ministries? Is that all considered tax-exempt income, or is that still up in the air? I'm just curious. Because that was raised by someone who I told we were doing the program. They said, well, what about the millions of dollars that's being raised by churches for television programs or so on?
Yeah, that is one of those major areas of scrutiny and audits by the IRS with respect to a whole host of different churches or religious organizations as well. When they generate a tremendous amount of revenue from television or otherwise, the question is, well, what portion of it is a donation? If what an organization or a church is receiving is a donation, then it qualifies as a donation. It should qualify as a tax-deductible donation almost without regard to the amount that's being received. If you they have very generous donors who are perfectly happy to make gifts to the church out of their own feelings toward their own religion, there is really nothing that is viewed by the IRS as being particularly amiss with respect to that. However, when it comes to, for example, television organizations and television revenues, sometimes those revenues are coming from television networks and the like themselves. When the revenue is something other than pure and simple donations, pure and simple contribution, then the church is, in some respects, is in business. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but there is an additional level of scrutiny by the IRS as to whether or not the major focus of the church is promoting its religion, or is it something else?
Ah, okay. So, but isn't it possible for nonprofits to sell books, to do other things that will generate, in some instances, huge amounts of income for them?
Absolutely.
And is that business income, or is that all still considered tax-exempt income?
The approach that the IRS takes to it is to look to see whether or not this other activity, other revenue-generating activity, whether it's selling books or other paraphernalia of any type by any 501c3 organization, is contributing importantly to the organization's, in the case of a church, religious purpose and religious existence. If that is the case, then that can be perfectly fine as well with respect to the organization, and it does not trigger any additional level of taxation. However, if the amount of the revenue becomes significant, sometimes more significant than the donations that the organization may otherwise derive from donors, then there's a possibility that it could trigger a so-called unrelated business tax. When the organization has been deemed to have gone so far into another line of business that has little or nothing to do with its religious purpose, the organization is thereby generating business income, which should be taxed just like any other business's income would be taxed.
I see. Well, you have given us a lot of really good information, and I really thank you. If my listeners would like to contact Attorney Montgomery, you can reach him at 202-223-1200. You can email him at jmontgomery@foleyhoag.com. That's FOLEYHOAG.com. Thank you so much, James. I really, really appreciate you sharing your expertise with my clients. I call them clients. I'm sorry. With my listeners. Thank you very much. And I hope I can call you to come back sometimes to tell us more about other issues where taxes and business are concerned.
Absolutely. It's certainly been enjoyable for me as well. And again, a happy Easter to you and all of your listeners.
Well, thank you. And this is Attorney Ethel Mitchell. I'm wishing everyone a happy Easter. Again, I am with the organization called Wills and Trust, LLC. I only prepare wills, trust, power of attorneys, and I do probate work. You can call me at 202-772-1988 or email me at emitchell@willsandtrust.net. I hope that you've learned a lot. I hope that what we've provided you is useful to your churches and your nonprofits, and I hope that you will join us next week when we will learn more. Have a good Easter and have a good day. Goodbye.
You've been listening to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 11:30 a.m. for another informative broadcast. To reach Attorney Mitchell, you may do so by calling 202-772-1988. That's 202-772-1988. Or log on to her website, www.lawtalkwithethelmitchell.com.
Mom, I got carrots for the Easter Bunny and hummus and ranch dressing. You know, something special.
Make your Easter basket extra special at Toys R Us. Load up with tons of goodies under $5, including Hot Wheels, Skylanders, Crayola, and more. Plus, save 30% on Easter items throughout the store. With Easter deals and a price match guarantee, make all their wishes come true at Toys R Us.
Limit 4 per customer. Exclusions apply. Visit Toys R Us for details.
Don't just complain about your cable bill going up. Do something about it. Call 800-912-1816. The more cable TV rates go up, the better digital satellite TV looks. Sign up for packages starting as low as $19.99. Best of all, there's no equipment to buy. You get free HDTV upgrade, a free DVR upgrade, and free professional installation. At just $19.99, what are you waiting for? Call 800-912-1816. Say goodbye to the cable guy. Cut cost and get more. 800-912-1816. That's 800-912-1816.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Sam Tucker woke to find crop circles in his cornfield that spelled out the word Geico. Was this a message sent by aliens? Sam went to Geico.com and saved hundreds of dollars with great discounts. He woke the next day to find new crop patterns had formed. They spelled out, "You the man." It seems the aliens were pleased indeed.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
If you've got 15 seconds, Geico could help you be a better driver.
Please don't text and drive. The average amount of time that you'll be distracted from the road while texting is about 5 seconds. In a vehicle traveling 55, you'll drive the length of a football field without seeing where you're going. You might as well be driving blindfolded. When the engine starts, the texting stops.
Manage your policy, get roadside assistance, and more. Just a tap away on Geico's free mobile app.
Hi, I'm Joe Theismann. No matter what stadium I broadcast from, I'd always have to find the closest bathroom, just in case I had that sudden urge to go. My prostate was giving me fits. But then I heard about Super Beta Prostate's nationwide 1,000,000-bottle giveaway, and I got a free bottle. What a difference it made. I don't have to go as often, and I don't have to get up at night as much. Now I wake up refreshed and ready to tackle anything. What's so special about Super Beta Prostate is that it's the most widely used supplement supporting a healthy prostate. Super Beta Prostate has sold over 5 million bottles, and it also has a trusted 10-year history, and it's all natural. There's no reason to accept the issues that come with an aging prostate. So get Super Beta Prostate today.
Call right now when you learn how to get a free bottle of Super Beta Prostate. Pay only shipping and handling. Call 1-800-459-7640. That's 1-800-459-7640. Hurry, supplies are limited. Call 1-800-459-7640. That's 1-800-459-7640.
News1.com is breaking news for Black America. News1.com tells the stories we care about. Our community, our concerns, our world. Uncensored, unapologetic. News One is news from our perspective. One people, one voice. News1.com.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Call Term Provider. Speak with Big Lou at 800-276-1640. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Provider has helped thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance. To buy $1 million of affordable term life for you, all you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-276-1640. Lou is one of you and will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-276-1640. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Call Term Provider, speak with Big Lou, and save on term life. Call 800-276-1640. 800-276-1640.
Hi, my name is Stanley, and I've been arrested for stealing shoes. I didn't really steal them, but I've been sent to Camp Green Lake anyway. The worst punishment a kid could get. And at Camp Green Lake, we dig holes. Lots of holes. I've only been here a short time, but I think the camp director is up to something. I'm Stanley Yelnats, and I'm covering more than dirt at Camp Green Lake. Explore new worlds. Read my story in the novel Holes by Louis Sacker. For other great book ideas, visit your local library or log on to literacy.gov. Brought to you by the Library of Congress and the Ad Council.
Whether it's a serious fall, fire danger, or other type of home emergency, Life Alert is there for you. The company, with its slogan, "Help, I've fallen and I can't get up," protects its members. Here are some of them.
When you have a heart attack like I did,